Let me ask the question I have asked at the end of last video section again. To what extent can we say these characteristics of science and the male culture is matching with each other, and if it is so, what does it mean? What should we do about that? Well, according to Nelson, there is a significant degree of match, and that match is understandable because science, well, as societies become more male dominated, and how and to what extent it goes back is another question which we will answer under another topic. But in the end, the male-dominated societies have created sciences which was mostly built by men. As a result, science also became a male-dominated activity. So, the second question we could ask is, so what should be done about this? I mean, at first we might ask, is it a bad thing that the science has objectivity? It concentrates on the objective view of, view uninfluenced by personal prejudices, personal perspectives, separation, logical consistency. I mean, it separates individuals and looks at their individual characteristics, logical contingency, logically being more, not contradicting with each other. The different scientific facts should not contradict with each other. Having math as a universal language, which can be maybe used more objectively, which can express what we want to say more objectively in a more clear sense. General, instead of concentrating singular objects, getting general rules which are true for every object or every individual in society or in every individual item in the world or any individual living being. And can't we say that lack of emotion and hardness are actually characteristics that are benefiting the science? I mean, if emotions come in it and if science become more soft, if the realities become more flexible, somehow, different scientific findings can change or are influenced by the social needs or social wishes, social wants. It is a good thing. Isn't it good that science is somehow when it sets truths, when it sets facts, those facts and truths are kind of independent of the feelings of the people or even needs of the societies. The needs of the society might be important, but can't we say that the truth should be stated independent of those needs, basically? So there are different approaches, even in feminist economics, and basically Nelson states those approaches, but then she actually she describes the approach which she states in more detail, and that more detailed approach has actually is a combination of the other two. So I will spend my time after stating those previous two approaches. I will set my time to describe that one. The first one is, these characteristics, even though they are also part of the male culture, they are beneficial and inseparable parts of the science. So science is built on that. Science has this type of a methodology, and changing this methodology might be costly. And in many ways, at least when science is basically done, these characteristics are useful in finding, in let's say, developing science, finding scientific truths. So, well, more women might enter to the scientific fields, but those characteristics might stay, and basically, women might, when they do science, at different activities, they might have different, let's say, uh, different characteristics, different characteristics, basically, or let me say, different approaches. But in science, basically, women might still take the male approach. What is known as male culture or male approach can be used also by women to advance in science or develop, create scientific development. The second approach is this femininity or feminine characteristics, connectedness, intuitive understanding, cooperation, qualitative analysis, concreteness. Emotion, nature, and softness. All of these things might be more important in some particular sciences, or at least they might create a second and separate approach for different sciences. For example, for psychology, maybe understanding the concrete special cases might be important. Or even in economics, there could be certain areas where understanding a special case in its most details might be important. So in that case, concrete studying this concrete case might be important. And for example, understanding connectedness of certain preferences, certain needs, or connectedness of the production, it might be important, basically, to discover certain aspects of economics. But they argue the feminine approach and masculine approach should remain separate, and in a way they can be represent two different currents in science, maybe done by two specific scientific communities that are separated from each other, which might have some connections with each other, but still remain to some extent separated. They should have their own spheres. The third approach is actually combining these characteristics. Objectivity, separation, logical consistency, mathematics, abstraction, lack of emotion, hardness. All of these things have their advantages, but in some also connectedness, intuitive understanding, cooperation, qualitative analysis, concreteness, emotion, nature, softness, they might also have their advantages. So in science, even when you design a single research according to this approach, a research paper or research study, it might be possible that we might have certain characteristics of the femininity might be beneficial. At the same time, certain characteristics of the masculinity might also be beneficial. So we might build a science where we don't suck with the characteristics of a single gender. Rather, we combine these characteristics, and we are free to actually design our research according to specific characteristics we need for that research. Actually, this approach is also to some extent built on a broader view, which is also subject of distinction of gender and sex. Well, sex is a biological biological definition. So biologically, certain members of species are male, certain members are female. Gender, on the other hand, is a social characteristics, and had all this cultural baggage in itself. So people who belong to certain sex, I mean, should not necessarily have the same gender role in different societies and different time frames. The way what a woman should be or what a man should be can very well change, even on average, in general sense. And of course, there are always some people who cannot fit to this general description of man and woman also at the same time. So basically, creating these two separate cultures to create a prototype male and prototype female, or prototype man and prototype woman, is, according to this view, kind of harmful. Note that this is not the view that all feminist economists, let alone even the feminists, are sharing. But according to this view, actually, each individual is separate and can basically should be able to build according to his or her own preferences and development and needs, his or her own characteristic. So directing people to certain characteristics, male or female characteristics, is not beneficial. And on the other hand, both female and male characteristics might have certain benefits. So certain degree of independence, for example, might be good for every woman. But certain degree of cooperation and connectedness, being able to know people around you, might also be beneficial for men. But same approach is also true for the science. I mean, for example, when we just classify hard and soft, hard is strong but rigid, unmovable. Soft is weak but also flexible. I mean, a soft approach, a hard approach might not be, for example, if you have a hard definition of how to manufacture steel, a certain product, well, that method might not be easy for every, let's say, society, every different society or every different nation. But if you have a more soft approach, if you have different possible, if you are actually instead of a rigid receipt, you have a soft, a less rigid, a more soft or flexible receipt, where different possible, let's say, methods or even inputs are mentioned. Well, that flexibility might help people to make that knowledge, which is in that case received, the way to manufacture steel, for different societies or even the same society at different maybe time frames. So that's an example. I mean that, well, science can describe, science can be used, and even in some cases itself describe how to manufacture steel. But that description might be a more, instead of having a rigid description, it might have be more flexible description, which might basically contain different ways, different approaches, basically, or even in some cases set a general path and and make it possible for well, individuals who use the receipt to find the specific case, the specific, let's say, processes to define and create specific processes for themselves. I will continue the next part.